everyone, welcome. I'm Rishika Barua. You're watching us on an NDTV web exclusive. Well, I have two very special guests joining me in the studios today. It's a privilege to introduce Don Heflin, Minister Counselor for Consular Affairs, U.S. Embassy. He is the visa expert who's going to answer all your questions. We also have Anthony Miranda, Counselor for Cultural and Educational Affairs, U.S. Embassy. He is the education expert. He's going to answer all your questions that you need to know about studying in the U.S. This is a very special live that we're bringing to you in collaboration with the U.S. Embassy, hoping to answer questions and dispel misnotions and doubts about studying in the United States in the midst of this COVID-19 pandemic. So a lot of you have written to us with questions, and I sincerely hope over the course of the next half an hour, we'll address most of them. Thank you both very much for sparing your time and being with us in the studios. I'm very excited to have guests in person, something we haven't done in a long time here at NDTV as well. But you know, I want to begin by asking you about the report that says that there's been a huge decline, a 13% decline in Indian students going to the US. This is, of course, because of the pandemic. Anthony, maybe to you first. How do you see a recovery from this?
No, it's a great question, and thank you so much for having us, Rishika. We're so delighted to be here with you in the studio as well. But you're right, we have seen states, and of course that's because of COVID. You know, we've seen COVID, the global COVID-19 pandemic, affect countries in so many ways, whether it's downturns in the economy, but also downturns in the number of students studying in the United States, and important for your viewers to watch. And in fact, I might ask my colleague Don to chime in here because he can talk a little bit about the excellent work that the consular team throughout Mission India did over the past summer.
But a lot really needs to be done, Don, to inspire confidence in a certain sense among students to come back.
It does, and we saw a pretty strong comeback last winter, about this time last year. We got about as many visa applicants for student visas as we had in previous winters before COVID. But this summer, we set ourselves a task to interview at least as many people as we had in 2019, the last summer before COVID. We exceeded that. And we also issued the highest number of student visas ever. 62,000 Indian kids went to the U.S. for college this past September, which we're very proud of. It took a lot of work.
And so what's I think important about this is that the Open Doors report still confirms that the United States is a top destination for Indian students. Indian students still comprise fully 20% of all international students in the United States. 1 out of every 5 international students comes from India. And so with the figures that Don just reported out from the summer, we still see great interest from students, Indian students and parents.
Right, and if you are a student or a parent or just curious about studying in the United States and the visa process, you can send us your questions on the Facebook or YouTube Live that you're watching right now, and I'll hopefully be able to take some of those questions and have the experts answer them. But I'm going to take the liberty to just talk a little more about how international education has been impacted because of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think the both of you understand this better than anybody else. Do you think mobility is going to be an issue?
You know, I think that, certainly it has been an issue, and we certainly saw that reflected in the Open Doors report for 2020. But with the figures that Don mentioned, we're already seeing that reverse. And so now we're sort of back on a positive trajectory. And as countries implement their vaccine programs, and as more and more people get vaccines and economies begin to open up, we're going to see that reverse.
Right. We already have questions coming in on Facebook about visa processes and slots opening up. So I'm going to get to all of those questions. Thank you very much for those of you who are writing in. But I also want to begin by asking you about one of the most commonly asked questions that's come in from students. And Rohit Bhanushali is one of those students who asked us how the pandemic has impacted scholarships and financial aid, because I think that's a question that concerns a lot of Indian students. What's your assessment? Would financial aid have been impacted because of the COVID pandemic?
Well, I'm glad that Rohit asked that question. It's a great one. And, just like I was mentioning earlier, we have seen, the global pandemic affect all industries, and, universities and higher education institutions are no different. But what I want to share with you is that fully 43% of all international students receive some sort of financial aid. So really, that to me says that there's a lot of opportunity for lower income and middle income students to pursue higher education in the United States. And that Open Doors report that I mentioned that was just released on Monday, there's 10 years of data that indicates and that confirms for us that middle income students indeed do get scholarships.
Right, that's heartening. And do you believe that there's been some kind of an impact of the pandemic? Has it become lower, perhaps chances diminished? Do you reckon that would have happened?
You know, it's interesting. You know, I think that universities are really very focused on ensuring that they can still have incoming classes that are diverse in all the different ways. And so as universities recruit students, they want to ensure that they are recruiting students, you know, some that may be able to pay sort of full freight, as we say, the full tuition bill, but they also want to make sure that they keep their doors open for students who might not be able to pay full freight, because that's what makes the educational experience in the United States so unique and so special, that you're going to have diverse students from economics, whether it's race, whatever it might be, to make that classroom as special as possible.
All right. And I think, you know, quickly, since we're talking about financial management here and scholarships, what about financial management while you are studying in the United States? You know, if you could just quickly shed light on that as well.
Sure, you know, it's funny. It's the same conversation that I'm having with my nephew who just started college in the fall, and I think it's the same kind of conversation that parents have with their students, whether it's an American student or an international student. What's great is that U.S. universities, their international offices, are really geared toward helping students and parents sort of understand and plan a monthly budget so that they can understand and anticipate the kind of costs that they're going to have.
All right. Well, I am going to come to you, Dawn, now, and literally I'm going to do this as a rapid fire because we have a majority of students who are very curious about visas. I think you must be answering so many of those questions yourself on a daily basis. But, you know, I think one of the most commonly asked questions, and we're getting a ton of them on Facebook as we speak, is about when new slots for visas are going to open. So do you want to just quickly address that?
We are opened a lot of slots for December, a lot.
Okay.
And looking forward to next summer, we think in the late spring we'll start opening up slots in late May, all the month of June, all the month of July, first half of August. All
right, so more slots are going to open, all of those asking questions. What about students applying for fall 2022? Any specific advice to them? When should they be starting their application process?
Yes, you should already be talking to the colleges and universities you're interested in. And then you want to get them to issue your I-20 in the spring, late spring. They can't issue it and you can't come interview until 120 days before you're supposed to start school. But that's about late April, the beginning of May for most people. So get that in hand, then get your visa appointment.
All right. You know, this is a Delhi-specific question at the moment, but Shiva Teja Reddy sent us a question saying, what if there's a lockdown in Delhi due to the air pollution, something which is being considered? It's been in the news. What happens to visa slots?
We'll reschedule. Most of our student visa slots are in December, so hopefully this will clear up by December 1st anyhow. We won't have any trouble rescheduling the November appointments.
Right. So Kraj wants to know about the age limit for student visas.
There is no age limit. And listen, I'm going to steal some of Anthony's thunder here. This is one of the great things about the U.S. university system. There are great universities all over the world. I can name a couple here in India. It's our system that's great. It's so flexible. Yes, you can be older and go to the U.S. and study. You can change schools. You can change areas of concentration.
All right. Well, I'm also looking at questions that are coming in. More slots open for spring. I think you've already addressed that. Well, what about people who received visas but couldn't travel because of the COVID-19 pandemic? There are a couple of people, Kalpana, for instance, asking that live right now.
Well, that's a great question. They should simply reapply. The fact they received visas before is going to make it pretty easy.
All right, so reapply, Kalpana. I hope that answers your questions. What duration are slots open for spring 2022? Tarika is asking.
We're doing some in late November and pretty much the whole month of December.
All right. Documents for visa applications and visa fees. This is a question that's been asked by Akshay Gaur.
Okay. You need your I-20 form. You need proof that you paid your SEVIS fee, and I'll come back to that. And you should at least think about bringing in some proof of how you're going to pay for it. We tend to ask that less than we used to. We know Indian families usually find a way, but just in case the vice consul asks you. SEVIS is a system, it's a computer system you register with in the U.S. when you first apply and get accepted to university, and then it tracks you throughout your student time in the U.S. If you change schools, if you change areas of concentration, make sure you're enrolled full-time each semester, and there's a separate fee for that. The embassy's fee for applying for the visas is $160. And yes, we take rupees.
Okay. How long can one stay on for after completing post-graduation with the student visa?
There are two answers. Anthony's going to have the second part. The first part is if you graduate and you're coming back to India, we let you hang out for about 30 days, traveling around and seeing the U.S. But we hope you're doing that while you're a student anyhow. But then some of you I know are interested in.
Some of you are probably also interested in knowing about sort of work opportunities
Yes.
while you're a student. So there are basically sort of two options for you. It's basically all called optional practical training, and all students are eligible to apply for optional practical training. So you can, basically your first year you're not allowed to work, but after your first year you can choose to start working part-time as part of your studies, and as long as you're maintaining, of course, your visa status and keeping your grades up and all of that. But you basically have 1 year, and you can spend that year during your second, third, and fourth years of your studies, or you can choose to not work during your educational period and then save up that year and stay an additional year in the United States to work. Now we have an additional program, or it's the same program, but additional time allotted for students who are studying STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And so they're entitled to stay in the United States and work for 3 years.
All right, very interesting. I'm going to come back to you, Dom, though, because I have suddenly a flurry of questions. Many people, Vedang, Dhruv, Chanu, all asking about when our embassy is going to start processing 221G.
Oh, good. It's a good question. There's a different answer to each of the 5 consular sections around the country.
Yes, I think we have questions coming in from everywhere. So.
But we're trying to clear out the 221Gs in November, early December, and you should be hearing from the consulate soon.
Okay, so I hope that answers your questions, because a lot of kids actually from Hyderabad and Delhi talking about that, so you can expect that to happen soon. I think you already answered that question in a certain sense about visa extension, for job search. Does the answer change when it comes to what's the window after you've completed your graduation or your post-graduation? How long can you look for a job on the same student visa?
30 days. Okay, that gets a little tricky. You want to make sure you stay in status, which is when you were landed at the airport the last time you landed, the man from our immigration service probably told you you could stay as long as you were in status as a student. So when you finish your last semester as a full-time student, you're getting pretty close to getting out status. So you really want to do your job search your senior year.
Okay. A question also coming in from Kushal Raju, and a couple of other people have asked that question earlier on, when you can expect F1 visa slots for previously refused students?
Probably at the end of our season,
Okay.
probably in late December, early January, and it'll probably be again next summer. It'll be similar. It'll be late August.
All right. So end December, beginning January, or late August. I hope that answers your questions. When is 221G going to start in Kolkata? I know you said this is several different areas with different
You can
time
check
frames.
with the consulate in Calcutta. They'll reach out to you. Luckily, Calcutta being one of our smaller consulates, the number of cases they have is not huge. So we hope to get through them in the next few weeks.
All right. Well, Shreyans, I hope that answered your question. Moving on, can visa be rejected after you've gotten admission into a university? How does that work?
Absolutely. When you get admitted to the university, they give you the I-20 form. That's really the document you need to start your visa application process. And we reject the right to refuse them. We don't like to. We'd like to say yes to everybody. But the main thing we want to see is that this course of study makes sense for you, that you're going to the U.S. to study, not getting admitted to a school just to go to the U.S.
All right. I think that's a very important clarification, and that's something that a lot of students should keep in mind. But since we're talking about visa rejections, and I know there's a question coming in later on how to tackle a visa interview, and I'm going to sort of ask both of you to answer that. But what are some of the do-nots? Like you said, you want to accept everybody to come and study in the U.S. So what are some of the red flags that you look for, just so students have an idea when they're making their applications?
We really look to see that this school and this course of study makes sense for you. And you should be able to explain that. Here's a do not. What we get a lot is people come in, they've memorized something they read on the web about the university, or their recruiter has given them language. And they just come in and they tell us about the school and when it was founded and how many students there are and that it's a good electrical engineering school. We could find all that out on Google. What we really want you to do is to tell us why this school, why this program? And what I advise students is this. There was an evening when you sat down with your parents and you told them, I've chosen. I want to go to this school and study this, and here's why. And your father and mother said, okay, that makes sense. We'll support that. You know, thinking about my own childhood and a lot of the Indian families I know, that conversation may have been the other way around. Your parents may have told you, yeah, they decided.
I was just going to say that. Yes, I was just going to
They
say that.
decided, but they explained why. Tell us that. And, you know, there aren't really any wrong answers in a lot of ways. If you've got a good plan.
Okay.
For instance, we know that Indian students who are going for undergraduate school might be 18 years old, and the families are concerned. And they may well say, I want you to go to a smaller school, smaller city. You can always go to a big grad school if you do well. And, oh, by the way, your auntie lives nearby, and then she can come and check on you every now and then. That's okay. We understand that in the
Yes.
Indian context. That makes perfect sense. So
Yes.
tell us that.
Yes. So the bottom line, I think, is if you're in a visa interview with Don's team, you need to talk to him or his team like you would to talk to your own family and justify your decision in a certain sense. I think
In
you
America,
put
we call it the
beautifully.
elevator pitch. Pretend you got an elevator with me, and before
Yes.
we get to the 10th floor, you've got to tell me.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Speaking of parents, a lot of anxiety around tourist visas for parents who wish to visit their kids or drop them to university.
All right, Rashika, I was the least popular man in India briefly this summer because I had to break the news that parents weren't going to be able to do that last fall. So this coming year, it depends on which of three categories you fall into. If you have a valid tourist visa in your pocket and you are vaccinated, you can go with your kid. If you had a recently expired tourist visa, there's a decent chance that this spring, between January and May, you may be able to get that renewed, in which case, if you're vaccinated, you can go with your kid. If you've never had a tourist visa before, chances are you're not going to get one in time to take your kid to school.
All right, I think that's very important information and very honest answers, so really appreciate that. Okay, I'm going to quickly run through some more questions. I think you've already taken on questions on when consulates are opening additional slots, and I'm going to once again urge students, a lot of you asking that question. Don's already answered that. You need to get in touch with a local consulate and get more information specific to your area. Okay, now the million-dollar question on tips to tackle that visa interview, and I'm going to bring both of you in, but Don, you go first.
Yeah, like I say, we want to hear that your story adds up. When your story doesn't add up, we think maybe you're just going to school to get your foot in the door in the U.S. and we're never going to see you back in India again. Okay, we don't like that. We want to see that you can explain why you want to major in a particular thing. And then, and Anthony can talk about this very well, but we have so many schools that have the same curriculum. So the question is, why did you choose this school? Why did you choose this town? You know, what was your thought process on this? And like I say, you know, these schools aren't free. Your parents and other relatives had to decide to devote the money. What did you say to sell them on that?
In some ways, you know, it's funny. I think about it in the same way that a student might be selling herself or himself to the university to which they're applying, you know. You want to be able to describe the passion that you have for the particular field that you're pursuing, for the area of the United States in which you want to study. And that's the kind of information that I think would be really helpful coming through in a visa interview.
All right, questions on J1 training Mumbai Embassy.
Oh, yeah, okay. Look, I got to apologize. Whenever I say students, mostly we're talking about the F1 students. We include the J1s, and there's a smaller group called M1s. It's all caught up in us together. When we talk about student visa appointments, we mean you J1s also.
Okay, so I hope the J1s who've been asking me specific questions know that all of that you heard applies to you as well. Okay, the right time to begin the visa process, I think this is something that you've already addressed, Don, but finances to be shown, you know, in order to establish eligibility.
Yeah, we're moving away from asking that in every interview, but there will be times when the vice consul really wants to see how you're going to do that. Be honest. We understand that an uncle or an auntie may be helping. We understand your family may be taking a loan to do this. That's great. Tell us that.
All right, again, questions on J1 visa rejections and when next appointments will be available for those whose visas have been rejected.
Well, if it was a 221G refusal, be in contact with your consulate. We're doing those soon. If it was a harder refusal, I think we'll wait until we've taken care of the first-time applicants. We'll do it at the end of the season. So for spring semester, probably late December.
Okay. Well, this was like a visa rapid fire, and I assure you there are still a lot of questions coming in, so I might just come back to addressing some of those. But I think it's very important, this conversation is so relevant given the COVID-19 pandemic, the challenges and changes. So I think it's imperative that we address some of those questions as well. Which vaccine should students get? I know a lot of them have probably already gone ahead and got their first shots, but Covishield or Covaxin?
Okay, big news a couple weeks ago when the World Health Organization approved Covaxin. That meant it's approved for entry to the U.S. So you need 2 jabs of either Covaxin or Covishield, plus 2 weeks after that to enter the U.S. So let's face it, if you're thinking about going to school in early January, you really need to start getting your jabs in September.
Right. I think that's important, what you say that, after you've got your second jab, 2 weeks later is when you're actually counted as fully vaccinated. So I think that's an important clarification there as well. Will doubly vaccinated students without booster shots be allowed in the U.S. next year, given the fact that the U.S. is already giving boosters?
If we're talking about January, yes, you will. If we're talking about next year, I don't want to make any promises as of now. The other thing that I don't know the answer to, and this is something to check the CDC website about and kind of keep up with after you get to the U.S., is will the scientists decide it's okay for you to get your booster with the vaccine that we have in the U.S., because we don't have Covishield or Covaxin. I don't want to prejudge that, but if the answer is yes, go do that.
Right. What about students getting boosters in the U.S.? Would they be eligible, fully vaccinated, double vaccinated students, would they be eligible for
Well,
boosters
again, pay attention to the science. As far as our system is concerned, you actually find vaccines are freely available. There's no waiting period or complicated process you have to go through.
So
you just go down to the clinic and they'll give you the shot.
But of course you have to consult your doctor. This is very important.
Absolutely.
Because you have to be aware of the science of which shot, and if you're mixing vaccines, how all of that is going to work out.
And this is actually something, Rishika, that I think that the international offices of universities are also going to be really keen to help students understand. Because of course it's not only Indian students, but it's all international students all around the world who may be coming to the United States with a particular WHO or FDA approved vaccine that might not be available in the United States. So universities and colleges with international students are going to be very attuned to this issue and are going to be absolutely wanting to help students understand what the right course of action will be.
I'm very glad you stepped in, because I think there are a lot of questions on what happens to COVID care once you've begun your education at a university. What about health insurance and COVID care? How does it work?
It's a great question, and really this is going to actually be very specific to the university that a student is admitted to, because each one is going to be a little bit different. But of course, universities are very concerned with the welfare and the health of their students and their faculty. Many universities, not all, but many universities are requiring that students also are vaccinated. So oftentimes, since we know that Indian students coming to the United States have to be vaccinated, oftentimes they're going to be joining a university community in which all the student body is vaccinated. But in addition, universities are going to be following the local guidelines of the city or state in which they're located and whatever COVID precautions are in place there, whether it's mask mandates, social distancing, and the like. And then, of course, in the odd chance that there is a breakthrough case, universities have systems already in place to make sure that, a student can quarantine and then still, of course, get the access to, their homework assignments and, their reading, etc.
Well, that's very reassuring, because there are a lot of questions on, COVID protocols. And I think it's important what you said here, Anthony, and I just want to highlight that for students as well, that there are different rules that apply across different universities because they're in different states. So it doesn't necessarily work like how it works here in India, where, the rules are pretty much similar, even though education here is the state subject as well. But the rules largely are the same. But it's important that you read the fine print of the university that you're going through. Okay, I'm going to very quickly address some more questions that have come in about visa slots opening up. So I think a lot of people joining in the live a little later. So do you want to just address that once again, Don? Visa slots opening up for research scholars, for students applying for masters, students applying for undergrad. I have a whole host of questions coming in.
We have opened a lot of slots in late November and in December. And then we think we'll open the summer slots for people going in fall of 2022, probably late April, early May.
All right. So I think I assume that a lot of you asking that question have missed the slots this time around, but you have those opening up late April, May. I also want to address another very important question on people who have asked for appointment changes.
Right. Look, there's a way to ask for an expedited appointment. It's on our website. If you got your I-20 late or something like that, feel free to ask. What we're hearing from is people who've got an appointment for, say, mid-December, and they're very nervous about that, and they'd like to come in earlier. Please don't ask. We're just saying no. We see this all the time. Students are very, very nervous. They want to get the earliest appointment they can. Don't worry about it. Once we get in an interview you, we're pretty efficient. Now, some people get their I-20 so late that they get a late appointment, and we found this past summer, as we have every year, the universities have a little give. If they say on that I-20 form you're supposed to be there the 2nd of January, and you communicate to them that for reasons beyond your control you can't be there till the 6th, they'll almost always say okay. But I know students don't believe that, and their parents don't believe that. But
so believe it, bottom line. Okay. I have another parent, Vinitha Gopal Krishna, who's asking, as a parent who's been vaccinated and who hasn't applied for a tourist visa, when would slots open for us to apply? As anxious parents, we would like to visit our children.
all right, ma'am, if you have had a visa before and it expired during COVID, there's a pretty good chance you can get a visa next year. We're going to open up a lot of slots in January. We're not going to open up very many slots for people who haven't had visas before. Just telling you the way it is. So the chances that you're going to get a tourist visa to take your kid to college or visit them in the next 6 months to a year are pretty low.
Okay. Well, I think that's an honest answer, but why is that? Would you like to address that as well?
That is a great question. COVID affected us just like it has everyone, every big institution. And we got to ramp back up. So we have to ramp back up in terms of our personnel and our processes. But then there's a second consideration, which is social distancing. This country still has only a certain percentage of people fully vaccinated. So we do not want to crowd rooms full of visa applicants like we used to. So there's a two-stage process for us. Even if you're able to use the drop box and renew your visa and not come to the embassy, you have to go to the visa applicant center. So they have to socially distance. If you have to have an interview, you have to come to the consulate. We have to socially distance, which just cuts down the amount of people that we can handle a lot. We would love to go back to seeing as many people as we did 2 or 3 years ago. But those of you who went through the visa process in those days know it was very crowded, and we're not going to get back to that anytime soon.
The one thing I want to add to that for that parent, Vinitha, is that, of course, it's so natural to want to bring your kid, or to accompany your kid. Gosh, when my nephew started college this fall, of course, the entire family was nervous, and they were only flying, 5.5 hours from the West Coast to the East Coast instead of 15 hours. But one of the things that we're seeing at U.S. universities and colleges is how much effort they are taking to make sure that international students who may be traveling sort of unaccompanied, without their parents, maybe it's their first international trip, are getting support from the universities. So they're doing a lot of sort of extra things to make sure that they have the kind of support they need, whether it's from the airport, getting their dorm set up, all of those kinds of things that are going to ease their transition into university life.
Well, I think it's really great that you added that, because I was actually just going to come to the point that this is a question that so many parents are going to have, and there are so many parents whose kids aspire to study who haven't, got a tourist visa, or haven't visited the United States before, and I think their anxiety levels are peaking right now. So be rest assured, because there are, of course, safeguard mechanisms in place. And I really appreciate the both of you for taking the time to do this, answering all of these questions so very patiently. I know there are a lot of questions that we have answered, and a lot of you are going to complain that I haven't asked your specific question. But I'm sure that there are email addresses, etc., in place, to answer specific queries.
I was just going to mention that, Rishika. I'm so glad you brought that up, because one of the things that I'd love to have everyone joining in on Facebook or YouTube to know is Education USA. All they have to do is type that into their web browser of choice, whether it's Google or Bing or Edge or whatever. That is the place where you can get accurate, credible, and up-to-date information about studying in the United States. We actually have 8 Education USA centers scattered throughout India: Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, and 2 in Hyderabad. The last one that second one in Hyderabad we just opened. There's also even an app. It's Education USA India. You can get it on Android or iPhone, download it, it's free, have your parents download it. You can get up-to-date information on studying in the US.
All right, super. So I think if we haven't addressed your questions, apologies, but that was a comprehensive answer on how you can get all your questions answered. Once again, thank you so much. It's been a privilege to have you here in the NDTV
Thank you,
studios.
Rishika.
Likewise.
Thank you all for tuning in. We'll, of course, continue to track these stories that matter to you here on NDTV. Thanks so much for watching us.